Episode 2 in our Property in Paraguay playlist. Here we are in one of our favourite little places.
Atira,
Yep.
which is a cute little town not far from us. It's really green and clean. It's got a reputation of being the cleanest town in Paraguay. So we like it here. It's cute.
It is, it's beautiful. We've got a few more things to add to the list. Again, not to scare anybody or to be sensational or clickbaity, but all of these things are situations that we've either seen people find themselves in or we've almost stumbled into them ourselves. So it's a constant process of learning, because in Paraguay, as I've said in previous videos, it's all up to you. Great freedom here, but with freedom comes responsibility. And there are fish hooks here that you probably wouldn't come across if you were buying in other places, like the place where we once called home.
Definitely. And I think that's why we always talk about it is like the slow down, take your time, tick the boxes to make sure. We hear a lot of stories about people that have properties that have no titles and they're still waiting for titles, or have problems with water, or bought a property and realised it's got issues and they need to spend a lot of money on it. That happens a lot too, doesn't it?
Yeah. But it's important to say also that we know a lot of people that have covered all the bases and are having a happy life, and
they were the ones that did their homework and took it slow, I think.
All got lucky.
Yeah, true. That can happen.
So we're hoping to increase our chances of getting lucky, and hopefully yours too, if you decide to buy a property here in Paraguay or indeed other parts of South America, because there's some similarities.
In Central, yeah.
Any place where...
Latin America.
Yeah. Any place where the regulation is minimal or non-existent, it's important that you do your own due diligence. So first on the list of our things that we think that you should look out for is the issue of access. And when we talk about access in this context, we're talking about access through a property that you might be considering. We've seen on more than one occasion properties that we visited where there have been mysterious tracks leading through the property. It's not uncommon to be looking at a piece of land somewhere in a beautiful, idyllic part of Paraguay, and it just so happens that that land is a traditional access point for people living in that area. It might be to go from one point to another, to get to the local store, or to even run some cattle through that particular piece of land.
Or cut through a back road, or I have to go around the long way.
Yep. Or to access a stream.
Yeah, true.
Because it's a saying here that the water belongs to everybody. And it's a generally accepted principle that people have a right to access the rivers. So if your land has got a river or a stream running through it or alongside it, it's not inconceivable that your land will be considered to be a reasonable thoroughfare for people living around there.
You can't fence it off.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
So again, it's one of those things that you'd probably want to know if your land is going to be used as a thoroughfare for people, whether it be pedestrians or motorbikes or maybe even cars. It is something that you definitely would want to know about and at least be able to take into account. It might be something that you're comfortable with. But what I would think that you'd need to think about carefully is the attitude of, oh, well, I'll buy the land and just put a fence up, because then you're faced with a situation where you might have interrupted the flow of the community. Another issue in regards to access is when you're looking at a piece of land is considering the adjoining properties and whether they actually have the ability to access those pieces of land through ways other than through your land. It's not uncommon, again, to have land that's essentially landlocked, and that traditionally a person's piece of land has been accessed through the land that you're considering buying. And I'm not a property lawyer, but my understanding is that in situations like that, people have rights in terms of accessing their land. And you could even end up in a situation where you own a piece of land that is subject to a thoroughfare. There's actually potentially legal remedies that people can call on in order to enforce their rights to utilise land to access their property. So it's definitely not a situation that you want to find yourself in, of owning a piece of land that you realise has a thoroughfare through it that can be maybe even legally enforced. Again, it's something that you might take it into account, you might be happy with it, but the important thing here is that you are able to take it into account before you buy the land.
I think too, sometimes because the land is being inherited or passed on to family, and some of it's being sold off and some of it's being passed on, but it seems to be also quite often being cut into crazy shapes and sizes as well, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
it's not, for us looking at it, it's like, well, that's not really logical how you would divide it up. So sometimes, yeah, potentially it might be you don't know who owns the land around it or other family, and it's been divided in a funny way.
Yeah, because I'm not sure if there's even much oversight as to how the decisions are made about how to divide up land.
Yeah, it's very loose, I think. It's a lot easier than, you're not paying all that money for the titles to be created and things. So I think it's,
So again, it
a little
goes
bit different.
Yeah, and it goes back to an earlier point in a previous video that we made about ensuring that you suss out what's going on in all of the adjoining properties.
Yeah, what's happening around. Yeah.
Because not only will you identify any access issues, but you'll also identify if there's intensive lottification or other things like agricultural activities, which just happens to be the next thing on our list.
Yeah. We were lucky to meet some people that had lived here for a long time when we first got here at a really cool market that they have in San Bernardino. And we got chatting to them and about, where they lived and why they lived where they lived. And one of the things that they spoke about was really the regions within Paraguay and the mass agriculture that is apparent in some areas. So that's one thing that you really need to probably do your homework on. I mean, we recommend that you do travel around and have a look around Paraguay and find your place, because everything is quite different. There are certain areas where they grow mass crops, and obviously with mass crops comes generally use of chemicals as well. And the results of that, unfortunately, is seen in the health of people living in that region. We've chosen Cordillera because it has quite a different landscape. It's quite hilly. In some areas it's rocky, and it doesn't have flat plains to it, to be honest. So there's never ever going to be any mass agriculture in this region. It's not possible. And also, even in some areas around here as well, it's probably also a preventative for lotties as well, because lotties only really come in flat areas. They take a big flat area and they carve it all up. So if you are maybe looking for something, if you're going to choose somewhere where it's some land that's a bit more hilly, then probably you are going to not be stuck amongst a whole lot of lotties at some point as well. So I think that's just another thing to consider. What's happening around, and you can find maps online of, the mass agriculture in Paraguay. Do some of your own research about what they grow and how they look after it. Is it GMO? Is it not GMO?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure on that, but possibly. Yeah.
I think the only exception there is in regards to Cordillera and monocrops is the sugarcane.
Oh, the sugarcane, yes, true. So there are some areas with sugarcane. Yeah. And we were talking to someone the other day. What were they saying about sugarcane? Does it get sprayed? It doesn't get sprayed?
I'm not aware, but it's something that if I was looking at property that had sugarcane in the vicinity, I'd be educating myself on it.
Yeah, about sugarcane. I don't know whether it's pretty hardy, but so on a domestic level, we haven't seen anybody using sprays.
No.
Like in New Zealand, you would drive along the road and the council had lovingly sprayed all along the sides to kill off the weeds and stuff like that, like just brown stripes. And people would do it outside of their houses as well, lovely brown stripes, because they needed to control the grass growing there. So we haven't seen any of that. We haven't seen anyone, spraying anything. I think they do maybe use, because the old leaf cutter ants are a bit crazy, aren't they? I think sometimes they have to use a bit of crazy chemicals to get those under control because they are pretty wild. They'll take stuff out. But yeah, so most people, I think, are naturally organic in the way that they grow food. But on a personal level, on a at-home level.
But we have heard of reports of apparently the government or some institution here running some sort of spray operation for the mosquitoes.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, they do spray. They use these big fog sprays for mosquitoes. So we talked about that in a previous... Did we talk about that in a previous video about mosquitoes?
Maybe. So, yeah, just something to think about. And lastly on our list is the issue of water and electricity as it relates to supplying a house or property that you're thinking about purchasing. Mm-hmm. When you go to a property and you're told what the situation is with water, quite often if it's a house, they'll say, it's on town water. And the situation here is the water management is a decentralised process where you'll have local water supplies which will just supply a village or a small group of houses, and you may pay a very small amount into that on a periodic basis to maintain that. And on the face of it, that's all good and it generally works really well and most people are very pleased with it. But it's not to say that water supply is particularly reliable or that it's even in really good condition. Depending on what they're pumping it out of, it may require treatment, it may or not be potable, drinkable.
And the depth of the well.
Yeah, and it may be kind of unreliable. So it's important that you don't take for granted when you're told that the house is connected to town water. It's important that you don't just assume that that's a reliable, potable source of water like you may be used to in the place where you're at now. So again, something not to be alarmed about, but to take into account when you're purchasing the property, because if it's not a reliable source, you may want to drive a well. So then that raises the question of, are you in an area that can support driving a well? Does the water have a sufficient underground water source to drive a well into it? What would be the cost of it? Are you in an area that's very stony? Therefore, driving a well will cost a lot more, and it can get up there in price if you're driving into pure stone. It's going to cost you quite a bit of money.
There's a bit of variation, isn't there, depending on the area?
Yeah. So again, it probably isn't going to be a deal breaker because in most places in Paraguay, there is the capacity to drive a well, but it's not something that you just want to take for granted. You just want to ask the question, what is the water source? How reliable is it? Where does it come from? Ask some questions. Is it drinkable? If it's not drinkable, what's my plan B with my water? Because that could be a real pickle if you buy a property and your water source is unreliable and then you find out that it's either really costly or not viable to drive a well. Well, it's not going to be good.
The great thing, though, in Paraguay is that you don't need a permit to drill a well, to have your own well, and there's going to be nobody monitoring it. Yeah, so happy days.
Yeah. Yeah, the water situation generally here is fabulous, especially in Cordillera. As you get up into the Charcos and some other places, the water might become a bit marginal depending on where you are. And indeed, there's some areas where it's really marginal. So you really need to do your homework when it comes to water. And not only the supply of the water, but again, in those areas of high agricultural practices, I wouldn't be buying anything without getting a water test.
Water test, yeah. As to, what's going into the aquifer.
Yeah.
In the local area.
Yeah. And also in regards to supply issues, electricity. It's really quite common to go to a house that hasn't been inhabited for a period of time to find that they'll say that it's got electricity, but it actually doesn't have a line running to the house. And it's quite standard practice that when a house isn't lived in for a period of time, they'll come and take the cable that goes from the power supply to the house. And of course...
And all the fittings.
Yeah, even the
All
fittings.
the power sockets, and
yeah.
who knows if they've even taken some of the wiring out of the walls.
Exactly. And they will say, oh, no, tranquilo, it's just a matter of reconnecting the wire, no big deal. But, of course, you need to verify that. You need to actually assess that the power line is in a location where it can easily be connected to your house. If it isn't, there's going to be some extra cost, and perhaps it's significant. But also, if they've removed the power line to the house, what does that say about the condition of the wiring in the house? Even in the best case scenario where you go to a house and it's got the electricity connected to it and you can turn on a light or whatever, I'd still be very cautious about assuming anything about the power situation there in terms of the quality of the installation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll never forget that house we went to early on, that crazy house where we had to go over that crazy bridge.
Oh.
And I remember we got to the house and the house had been, it was like probably the first house we saw like that, wasn't it? It had been just stripped. It had been upcycled, shall we say. They'd taken like all the toilet, everything. Everything was gone, all the light fittings, I don't know how much of the wiring, just everything that they could repurpose had been repurposed, because they'd actually built another house. So they'd moved, they had another piece of land, they'd built a new house, and they just were moving, so they'd taken everything. And we were standing there and we were sort of looking around going, okay, what about the power, what about the water? And then we noticed, that there was no cable coming into the house. But the house was up on a ridge, and the power cable had come from across the other side of the gully. And we were like, how are you think going to get that back again? And we've seen quite a few houses now like that have been just, wasn't it one the other day?
Yep.
Just totally stripped. And this particular house the other day, we thought, like it's got good bones and it might be good to buy and you could renovate, but you'd need to seriously work out all the costings of replacing all of those things. And again, what is the wiring like if it's been sitting there?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. I think if I bought a house that had been up for some time, the very least I'd be getting an absolute thorough electrical inspection.
Yeah.
With the expectation that they'd probably come back to me and say that it hasn't been done properly.
Yeah. And how then do you do it in the how would you do it in the walls, because they're like plastered and...
That's right.
How would you even check?
Well, they would have to look in the sockets and see the grade of wire that's been used and see if it's been properly earthed, and look at the actual configuration, by looking at all of the sockets and the lights and everything. An electrician will be able to sort of nut out whether it's been run properly. But it's not something that you'd want to take for granted. And we know people that have purchased properties only to find that their wiring was quite dodgy.
And plumbing.
Yeah.
And plumbing, and how do you fix that, with the drains from your bathroom or whatever, you're going to dig up the whole ground and try and fix it because the pipe's not big enough or whatever it may be.
Yeah, well, exactly. Plumbing, another issue, because it's a supply issue of water to your property and the exit of grey and black water from your property. What are the pipes like that they've laid? Are they properly vented? And it's so common when you go to properties here in Paraguay, and indeed any place that we've travelled throughout.
Guatemala, Nicaragua is the same.
You actually really do appreciate the finer details of the technicalities of those trades. I mean, we're just used to calling the plumber and thinking he just throws in pipes, but there's actually hundreds of years, going back to the Romans and beyond, back to the Babylonians, of wisdom that goes into how we do our plumbing systems, that it's not until you come to a place that isn't so strict about the adherence to those processes that you realise, oh, that's why they vent a toilet outlet, because it's about not only running out the waste, but it's also
The
about
airflow.
giving it airflow, because these things require both to operate correctly. And you kind of have to go back to basics, assume nothing, and acknowledge that we have really relied a lot on just standing on the shoulders of giants in terms of the tradies and the knowledge that's gone into these different things, whether it's electricity or water or plumbing, that it's so easy to go into a house and it looks kind of like a house that we would have seen in a place where we once called home, but it doesn't mean it works like that.
No. And a friend of ours was telling us recently that where she's living, the owner needed something done, something wired or whatever, and so asked around, oh, does anyone know an electrician? Does anyone know an electrician? And they said, oh yeah, this person. And they came around and started sort of doing something, and the owner of the property was like, I'm not sure whether this person knows what they're doing. And when they inquired, like, are you an electrician? Oh no.
Yeah.
I can just do it, sort of thing.
Yeah, because they got
Yes.
gotten away with it before, not in a devious way.
Hey, you got to take your hat off. You probably could do it, but
Yeah,
could be a bit hit and miss.
but that's the same with everything, isn't it?
Yeah,
There's a lot of mechanics here and a lot of
yeah,
and they're very, very handy people, and they can do a lot
Yeah,
of things.
amazing.
They're very clever.
yeah.
But when it comes to these things that you kind of want to get right,
Water
there's-
and electricity are important.
yeah, definitely, yeah, and plumbing. The plumbing's so important. It's not uncommon that we've heard of stories where people have got mosquito manifestations coming out of their
Up through their pipes.
showers because it hasn't been
properly.
properly vented, so that there's
something's
water
going
just
on.
sitting there.
I think the hardest thing too is so like, you know, when you've got a wooden house and there's something going on underneath, you can pull up maybe some floorboards, can't you? If you've got, you know, a raised foundation, and pull up some, oh yeah, what's going on there? But when you've got tiles and
Yeah,
like, how do you pull that up and look?
not easily. It's not easy to suss those things out when it's all hard baked into your foundation. So again, just all things to think about, nothing to be alarmed about, but definitely to take into account. And it's one of those things that once you take these things into account and you factor in the numbers, you really then get a good gauge as to whether you're better off to buy an existing house or whether you're better off to build.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's the point where we get to, when we'll go and look at something, won't we? And we'll go, oh, this would be really nice, and you could reno it up, and you could do that. And then you go, but A, you're spending this money, and B, you're buying a bit of the unknown. Like, what could be wrong with that property, and then how much are you then going to have to invest into it, or can you even fix it?
Yeah.
And then we go full circle, don't we? And then we go, you know what? Are we better to build to know what we have rather than be forever? Because it seems to be constant, like people we know that had a leaking roof and they fixed it, and now it's because it's going into winter and there's been more heavy rain, suddenly they have a leaking roof again.
Yeah.
And that seems to be a thing too, isn't it? The tiles and the leaking roof and the stuff like that.
Yeah. And it also touches on another thing that I think we've spoken about in previous videos somewhere, about our tendency to over-trust when it comes to advice that we get. Be really easy to go to a property and identify some issues with your plumbing or your electricity, to turn to the agent. You may have got a good relationship, and you may even trust because they're actually nice people, and they are probably quite honest and upright. When they think about rectifying a problem, they think about it in terms of the standard that they would rectify it to. So if you identify a problem with the shower, they'll go, oh, tranquilo, we can get that sorted. You know, that won't cost you much. It won't cost you much in terms of the standard that they would perhaps adhere to. But if you want to do it to a serviceable standard, it could be a different kettle of fish. So it's one of those things where sometimes we turn to the person that we've come to trust, which often is the agent, and we rely on the numbers that they quote, and they're the local numbers based on a local standard. And you need to make your own judgment call about how reliable that is, or if you want to go with that standard, or you want to, get a better standard.
Yeah, the other thing is I've seen ads as well that say electricity and water nearby.
Yeah.
Well, what's nearby? Like, what's the cost of getting it to your house? Because you will be paying for all of that. And recently we had some friends that built a house or building a house and tapped into that local water well, but then realised because they were higher than the well, they needed to pay for a pump and then all the pipes and plumbing and everything. And by the time they did all that, they weren't that far off of the cost of putting in their own well and having that total water security and probably better pressure maybe as well even. Mind you, they've got a pump, so it shouldn't be too bad. But yeah, you've got to sort of weigh all that up too.
Yeah. Again, it was, achievable, but it would be better off to have that number in your head before you hand over the money for the property.
Yeah.
To really drill down.
Yeah. And, like buying your own power lines and it's just so different, isn't it?
Yeah.
To where we've come from it's all achievable, isn't it? But it's just things that you've got to think about.
Yeah.
You just didn't think about before, really. You would never go and look at a house where we come from that wasn't connected to the power supply.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
no. Or maybe the power company had just switched it off or whatever, that would be it.
And when you're placed in these situations, we all rate ourselves in terms of our ability to not fall for this or fall for that. But it's so easy when you're in such a relaxed place, surrounded by nice people, often very trustworthy people, but people who are used to working in a Paraguayan way. And when you get advice, it's so tempting and easy just to go, oh, well, they said it will only be X amount, or it should be easy. No, that's doable because Fred said it is. Only to actually then learn that to do it to the way that you want it done.
Yeah, it's going to be, and also, obviously, these different pricing and different materials. So there's different pricing and different pipes and stuff, isn't there? And the right sizing and stuff like that seems to be a challenge too, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, because there isn't real stringent standards.
Yeah.
It's not uncommon for people to go to the hardware store and just find, this pipe looks like it should do the job, but it might not even be a pipe that's suitable to go into the ground. Yes.
Or sometimes we heard a story where someone, what did they need a pipe for? Something. They were building a swimming pool and they needed a pipe for something, and so they just went and grabbed a bit of pipe from the owner's shed.
Yeah.
Used
That's
that.
right. Yeah.
And then it didn't work.
Yeah. And then they broke it or something.
Oh, it was the pipe that they used for getting fruit down out of the tree or something. And then they just took it and they just cut it up and then they didn't use it anyway. And then
Yeah.
it was quite a long piece of pipe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Resourcefulness.
Yeah, totally. And it's a wonderful thing to have that freedom, but you don't want to be paying for the consequences sometimes of what comes with too much freedom. Yeah. So they're just things to think about. And just something that we want to get across in these videos is these aren't hypotheticals. We're not making these videos just for the clicks or the views. But just about everything that we cover, we've seen some version of this situation.
Yeah, or heard of it. Or just, Yeah.
They're just all things that now we're not in the place where we once called home, so the rules have changed and we've got to change with them.
I think that's just also been a process for us as well. Like probably what happened to us in Nicaragua with buying those 2 properties, and then we were aware of some of the key stuff, but then when we started to really unpack it all, and then now we've come here with open eyes and then we're unpacking even more. of looking at people, like people that came here in a crazy rush because of what was going on in the world and bought land with no titles and still have no titles and things like that. So it's always that rushing and that Western world fear of, oh, quick, I've got to come here and I've got to buy something, and it's what drives you. And I think you just, when you let go of that and realise there's plenty of land, you can build a house here, it's not a drama. You can find good houses, they just take time. And you know what? Until such time you can rent and it's not expensive. Where we came from, you are under a sense of urgency, because if you're renting, you're paying so much money, and you'd be like, oh, quick, I need to buy a house so I can live in it instead of paying rent to somebody else. Whereas there's lots of accommodation options here all over Paraguay. And some of them are really, really cost effective. So you don't need to panic.
Take advantage of that.
You take advantage of that. And I mean, that's how it used to be in the good old days, wasn't it? You rented a place, you saved up your deposit, your rent wasn't killing you, so you could save the deposit, and then you bought a house, and it was just like a natural cycle. There was no crazy sense of urgency or desperate measures or, oh, quick. But so now you've got the blessing of that, but you've got to realise that there's no protection and regulations, so you've got to take your time, and luckily you can.
Yeah.
It's no drama.
You are the council.
Yeah. And it's the double-edged sword that we talk about. We love it here because of the freedoms and stuff and the lack of technocracy, but the other side of it is you need to create your own systems to prevent things from going a bit AWOL. Same with buying a car, isn't it? Buying a car, building, buying a house. Those are the core things, really, where you need to be buyer beware. Hey.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think it's one of these things that I can say absolutely for certain I've seen a lot smarter people than me come unstuck here. So when I see people smarter than me coming unstuck, it gives me a boot to remind myself that none of us are beyond the potential of making a dumb decision, or perhaps not even dumb, but just...
an emotional one, maybe.
Yeah, just thinking with our previous place that we once called home's perspective, and coming in and just having a blind spot. And it can be disastrous, and I don't think there's any level or class of individual that I've seen that isn't potentially exposed to that risk. So the best antidote for that we can suggest is taking your time, because you're not only taking your time about looking at the properties and the area, but you're also getting contact with others. So you're meeting people that know a good electrician, but not only do they know a good electrician, you get to know that person well enough to see the work that they did in the house that they've done.
Yeah.
The same with the plumber, the same with the builder, whatever it is, the same with the lawyer. If you go to buy a property, you get to meet someone that you now trust who knows a lawyer.
Yeah.
You see that they've done the process properly. You can't shortcut that process.
That word of mouth network.
No.
It's vital, isn't it?
Yeah. And the process...
personal recommendations.
Yeah, and the process of meeting that person enough times to know they're legit, so the lawyer that they use seems to be legit.
Trust them too, yeah.
There's the house that they bought, they're living happily ever after. There's actually some substance behind what they're saying. You can't shortcut that process.
No.
Or if you do, it's at a risk.
Yeah, definitely. And that's Paraguay, really, isn't it? It's a word of mouth country.
Yeah.
And so that's how you've got to work too. And I suppose that's been where we come from. That was a little bit of it, but it's sort of been lost. It's been lost, hasn't it? And that's the way that Paraguayans work, isn't it? They work on word of mouth.
Yeah. Yeah.
They need to buy a car. They follow their networks and find a car.
Yeah.
Do they jump on Facebook Marketplace? Probably sometimes, but it's more like they start banging the drums and something comes out of the woodwork.
Yeah. Yeah. And the car's a good example. We're 5 mechanics later into our car odyssey, and
car journey.
Yeah, and we actually think that we've found a really good mechanic.
Yeah.
5 mechanics later, and so how could we have shortcutted that? By waiting a lot longer to buy a car, which we weren't prepared to do.
Yeah, because we had car fatigue from being in Nicaragua, didn't we? We had transport fatigue.
Yeah, and despite the opinion of some people out there in YouTube land, we have been in Nicaragua for quite some time before coming here.
Yes.
And so we were very keen to have a car here, and we asked everyone that we ran into, do you know a good mechanic? And we got...
Well, we didn't know enough people.
Yeah, that's right.
To know.
We got a lot of different answers.
Or the people that we knew had new cars.
Yep. Or had mechanics that weren't taking on new customers.
That didn't want any more business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we bought a car and we've had issues with it, which look like they're totally resolved now. It looks like we've got a great mechanic.
How do we find the good mechanic though? We found the good mechanic through word of mouth from a really awesome restaurant that we go to, and they own it. And they said, we've got cars and they look after our cars. This person's fantastic. The first 2 couple of mechanics weren't recommendations.
And also the guy that recommended us, the mechanic that we're happy with now, we took time to get to know him.
Yes.
And realise
that's right.
And establish that he's a nice guy, he's very reputable, and that
he's European,
yeah,
so he has a different standard.
Yeah. So that's only been time.
Yes.
So
yes,
we have now gone through that process. It's cost us some money, but I look at that and I compare it to buying a property.
Yeah. At least it was just the car learning curve, not the house learning curve.
Yeah. So, you know, lots to think about, but, you know, I think the biggest takeaway is don't overestimate your ability to just magically avoid all the pitfalls that are potentially out there. Just take your time.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And wherever you want to live in Paraguay, just go. Once you decide where you want to live, just go and rent there and get meshed into that community and meet those people that can help you and guide you to the right, you know, right builder, the right mechanic, the right whatever. Because there will be a network there, and we assume that, you know, there's not, but there is, and it takes time to connect to that network.
Yeah.
Unless you personally know someone that's already living there and they're connected. But for us, we didn't know anyone when we came to Paraguay.
No.
So we were like, okay, you know.
Yeah.
But the longer we spend here, the more people we meet, the more connections we make, the more informed we become.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I love about Paraguay so much, is you are surrounded by a lot of like-minded people here.
Yeah.
That have come here for the same reasons, and so you're, you know, on the same page, and also willing to really help you and show you the way, or tell you how to get this, or where to get this, or whatever.
Absolutely. It's not a matter of not having people who are wanting to help you. There's tons of people.
Yeah.
It's just finding the ones that have got the best information.
Yeah.
The best recommendations.
Yes.
Yeah. So there are 3 things that we think you should add to your list of considerations when looking for a property. And please stay tuned, because this is part of a series of episodes that we're releasing about all of the things that we've identified that you might want to think about and put on your list. And coming up in hopefully the next episode, we'll be talking about the really incredibly important thing of titles and getting the correct paperwork and how to make sure that you
the actual buying process.
Yeah. We'll get working on that for you. But in the meantime, if you want to know anything more about anything that we're talking about, or if you want to fast track the information that we're releasing, or...
So if you've got like any personal questions, like if you are here now and you're looking at property and you want some more information, or just even looking to move and have some questions, you can't find the information on the blog or the YouTube channel, you can book a one-on-one with us and a 1 hour session. And that's where like you send us your questions and we sit down and we go through them all and give you all the answers that you need. There'll be a link in the comments. We'll put a link in the comments, so it'll go through to the booking page, which has got more information about it and how to book.
Cool. And also, if there's anyone out there watching this video that has been through the process here or has just got some ideas about other things that people should be thinking about when buying a property in a relatively unregulated market, hit us up. Always happy to add it to the list. This is designed to be a resource for people.
Absolutely.
It's not about finding the ideal property that has no issues with it. It's about buying the property, knowing all the issues and doing it anyway on your terms.
Yeah.
And being able to budget for those things.
Yes. Yes.
Because so many of the things that we're talking about has a financial price tag attached to them. So when you're making an investment, you want to be able to take those into account. You don't want to find out after the fact.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, I hope that's useful. Stay tuned because, as I say, we'll be releasing more videos about this and other exciting adventures that we get up to.
Yeah. And I think probably, sometimes do you think we're too intense? People think we're too intense.
I don't know. You say I'm too intense. I'm sorry about that. Someone's got to be.
But I think it's important. These are really important things. And the last thing we want is for anyone to just go, why did I do this? And just,
yeah,
that's what it's about.
Yeah, exactly.
Looking after people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's nothing worse than seeing mistakes made that don't have to be made.
Yeah.
Especially when I make them, but even when I see other people make them, it kind of hurts me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not nice.
Absolutely.
And not necessary.
Yes.
So I hope you found that useful, and until next time, take care. Ciao.
Ciao, ciao.